Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your moderator and distinguished panelists.
Good morning. I'm impressed to see so many people here. I'm trying to find which one of these stars has drawn this big crowd, but please don't tell me. I'm David Wessel. I'm director of the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy at the Brookings Institution. And we have just a terrific panel today to talk about, if you look beyond, I think, our near-term problems, which are severe, there are two things that strike me as being just incredibly important to the well-being of the world. One of them is, do we grapple with climate change? But the other is, will AI and related technologies lift productivity growth and allow us to have the resources for more people to live out of poverty, for us to deal with our government debt problems, and to promise our children and grandchildren a higher standard of living than we could have imagined before we encountered these technologies. So you all know the managing director, Kristalina Georgieva. Simon Johnson is also familiar to people here. He was once chief economist at the IMF, but then he went in to win a Nobel Prize. Ruth Porat is now the president and chief investment officer at Alphabet and Google, but she's previously had experience on Wall Street. Minister Mohammed Al-Jan is finance and minister for the Saudi government, one of several jobs he's had in the Saudi government before he left the private sector, and he's also, of course, the chairman of the IMFC. And at the far end is Tony Elumelu, who's an African investor and philanthropist, founder of a family-owned investment company, but importantly, the founder of a foundation, the Tony Elumelu Foundation, that helps support entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs throughout the continent of Africa. So why don't we get right into this, Managing Director. We know that productivity growth is an important, in fact, the most important thing in rising living standards. It's why we have more goods and services than our grandparents did, even though most of us work fewer hours. Now, productivity growth has been a little disappointing in the recent decade or so, and I wonder how optimistic you are about AI and related technologies in lifting productivity growth and the well-being of people. Well, on a 1 to 5 scale, how optimistic are we? 5.
I'm very optimistic about the role of technology. If you look at our history, what has been the major drive of transformation that lifts up productivity and growth, time and again, technological advancements, then they are integrated in the economy and penetrate across sectors. So where we are today, growth is underwhelming. We are projecting medium-term growth at around 3%. You look back in the pre-COVID era, and growth at that time on average was 3.7%. Why is growth underwhelming? We calculate that more than half of this slowdown in growth is because of slowdown in productivity growth. So if we want to see the aspirations of people met by vibrant economies that deliver for them, we have to unlock productivity growth. Who is doing well? The United States. This economy outperforms the rest of the world in terms of productivity growth. And when you look for the reason why this is happening, It is innovation economy, and one in which innovation moves from discovery to business to scale fairly fast. What does it mean for the bet that today is being made on artificial intelligence? We see this bet most strongly made here in the United States. And when we look at the range of impact, at the IMF we came up with somewhere between 0.1 and 0.8% lift up of growth. This is a big range, and I would admit there are many that are very pessimistic and say this is all made up story. But if we are right, and if we are in the higher end of the range, this missing almost 1% from historic trend is going to be compensated. Is this a done deal? No. We recognize, actually we have Ruth here on the panel, she's going to tell us how much we should be venturing into dreaming this big dream. But from the standpoint of the fund, what we want is to see across the world faster advancement in AI and adaptation, not just having a data center producing all kinds of things, but then having AI transforming across the board the way we work, the way we live, the way we interact with each other. Some of this is already happening. I want to ask people in the audience, may I, Mr. Moderator? So I have a question for the audience.
Do I have a choice?
No, you don't. You're in my house. So, but I'm polite, I'm asking. So my question to the audience is this. How many of you are using ChatGPT?
Or Gemini.
Or, of course, I'm so sorry, of course.
Or Microsoft Copilot.
Or Microsoft Copilot, yes. How many of you, let me expand, are using AI already? Raise your hand. Okay, how many are not using anything and you think this is really a nuisance? Nuisance people?
Oh, there's one in the back.
One in the back, okay. So here is your answer. We are already moving in the world of AI, and the question is how quickly, how effectively across the board, and is AI going to be a source of further convergence or a divergence within countries and across the world?
Thank you. So, Professor Johnson, we know that the potential of new technologies to change the world is great, but I wondered if you could put this in historical perspective. We know two things. We know there are some technologies that have delivered enormous benefits, electricity, I think the internet. There are others which we don't talk about because they didn't develop. How do we judge this one in relationship to the past ones, and particularly how do we think about diffusion of these new technologies?
Thank you, David. Well, as the managing director just outlined, there is a brilliant potential future in front of us which runs through AI. The problem, though, David, is if this is going to be more like railways, for example, which had very positive transformative effects across society, you need two things to happen with AI. One is automation. That's clearly already happening. It's somewhat, I think, that's already what's in the room, which was just demonstrated, that people are using AI instead of asking somebody else, instead of using some other approach to dealing with issues. But the second thing that you really need is new tasks. Does this technology create new tasks, particularly new tasks that demand human expertise? So what happens to the demand for labor? And in order for Kristalina's 5 out of 5 score on the productivity front, you need people who are displaced by automation to go on and do new things, and you need new people entering the labor force to find new productive tasks. If it's the case that, for example, we create a lot of tasks, but you don't need any skill or expertise to do them, then people are going to get pushed down to a pretty low wage level, and that's just within the United States. As Kristalina said, we have a lot of advantages in the US when it comes to starting new businesses. When we look at the rest of the world and we think about the global division of labor, if there's a lot of automation, including in manufacturing, including in everything that's consumed in the United States, for example, where are the new tasks for the world? Who gets those jobs? What are those jobs? How do people feed themselves? So I'm less optimistic than the managing director. I'm more of a 1 or 2 out of 5 on the productivity transformation. I think it's going to change society profoundly, or it already is, but are we going to be able to convert that at the world level into productivity gains and shared prosperity? That's the open question.
I see. So, Ruth Porat, I kind of think you must be required to be an optimist on the capacity of technology.
I'm a realistic optimist.
A realistic optimist. So, when you think about this, how confident should we be that this is like the railroads and electricity as compared to something which I don't know because we don't remember it?
I think we have reason to be optimistic, but it's not a foregone conclusion there will be a productivity uplift for the reasons they both cited. The critical element is what do we see with respect to diffusion. And it's wonderful to see everyone have their hands up that they're at least trying something with generative AI. But what is needed is substantive change in the nature of work, in the nature of innovation. And I think that to actually have the unlock, I come back to 3 major areas that we each can focus on. First and foremost, very much to your point, is clearly innovation. The creation of new businesses, new lines of opportunity. So for example, at Google, I'm honored to work with Nobel Prize winners. 2 Nobel Prize winners, Demis Hassabis and John Jumper, created something called AlphaFold, for which they won the Nobel for chemistry. It is the 3D prediction of protein structures. It is described as the greatest contribution to drug discovery in our lifetime. They open sourced it, so now more than 3.5 million scientists around the world, 190 countries, are using it to create businesses, create solutions. That's the kind of radical rethink of what is happening that is needed to get a productivity boost. It has to be reimagine the art of the possible. Operating leverage, you sort of got to it. I think it's very important. How do people use AI to improve the operational effectiveness of their business? What we are already seeing in small businesses, and it is still very early days, small business owners are telling us AI can give them the opportunity to have reach that is many multiples of what they had otherwise in marketing, in customer support, in training. And so for those who are already using AI, they are seeing a double-digit increase in revenues because of the opportunity to grow their business even faster. The third critical area for each of us is risk management. It is less expensive to prevent than to fix. So all of us should be using AI within cybersecurity as an example, or fraud detection and beyond. And it's not only dollars. What's exciting about it, it's the reputational benefit, it's the time, but by saving that money, you can then invest it in innovation. You need to be investing it for growth. So I agree that it's critical that it's all up to each one of us. We need to be on that journey, and leaders here need to make it clear there is no turning back, because it is about the application in new, reimagined ways.
So if you take Google or Alphabet as a case study, can you give us one example of how AI or related technologies are changing something significant that is different than it was if we were having this conversation, say, 5 or 10 years ago?
I can give you many, but I'll pick one.
I only asked for one.
I'll just pick one. Probably the best representation of AI in the physical world on the planet is Waymo, self-driving cars. And we started on that journey because more than 1 million people die on the road every year. AI does not get distracted, it does not get tired. This is a safety opportunity. More than 40,000 people die every year in the United States, 120 people a day. It's like an airplane falling out of the sky every day. That would be a national, global crisis. With self-driving cars, we can improve safety meaningfully. And for anyone, how many of you have been in a Waymo yet? Okay, a lot of you have a lot of joy to come, as the managing director knows. It is fun, it gives you back productivity, and it is safe. It's already about a quarter of the drives in San Francisco. It's a tourist magnet. So that's one example, but there are plenty of others in the way people work, and everyone's already using it in photos and search and everything else.
So, Mr. Alamulo, as both Simon Johnson and Kristalina Georgieva have mentioned, We in the United States have the luxury of having a lot of this technology developed here, and we have a lot of people adopting it. And I'm curious how this looks to you from your viewpoint in Africa. Is AI making a difference now? How big a potential do you think it has to solve some of the problems and lift the growth of African economies? And also compliments on the socks.
Oh, you know, the audio, I thought was on the back. David, thank you. Good morning, everyone. You know, when we talk about productivity in the digital age, it's really about people we're talking about. Productivity is not just about, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Productivity is not just about output per worker. Productivity is really about opportunity per person. In Africa, we see this age as we see the challenges and we see the prospects. We have leapfrogged in the past, and we think that this digital age presents a great opportunity to leapfrog further in the area of healthcare, agriculture, and even in the area of electricity. But for us to take advantage of this, there are structural barriers that we need to fix on the continent. We have infrastructure deficit on the continent. Access to electricity is so critical for the advancement of AI and, of course, the productivity that comes with it. We do have this challenge on the continent. We also have access to capital challenges that affects entrepreneurs in this space of AI and co. And so we need to find a combination therapy that addresses these challenges for us to reap the benefits that we see. We need to see a concerted and deliberate massive investment in AI, in infrastructure that unleashes AI capabilities and productivity on the continent. I like to see and hear Ruth. She, through the Google platform and the Tony Melu Foundation, we've been working together to help to support more young African entrepreneurs. What we have on the continent, we have a youth that is energetic, eager, and willing to do something, but constrained by some of the barriers that exist. And so when we come together, put resources together to support these youth, we're actually helping the world to improve productivity. And we're also trying to make sure that, because AI on its own, if we don't deliberately invest in digital infrastructure, we can actually create further problem for the one area of inequality. And that is why, like Google, the Tony Melu Foundation, our group, we've seen the impact of combining resources in helping to improve access to digital infrastructure that helps ultimately to drive efficiency. So for the African continent, there's a lot that we can do, a lot we should do, a lot we must do with our development partners. Africa tried in the area of mobile money. We revolutionized mobile money not because our systems were perfect, but because entrepreneurs on ground innovated within the constraints that existed.
I mean the way that mobile phones leapfrog.
Yep.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. The mobile money revolution.
Right.
It happened on the continent in spite of the challenges.
I see.
Not because we don't have challenges, but because entrepreneurs innovated around the constraints.
Right.
And so when this kind of opportunity, I like to use it to call on everyone, public, private, development partners, big technology companies, institutions like the IMF and co. Let's work together to ensure that AI and its productivity enhancement and efficiency works for all. And
Thank you.
AI and productivity in the 21st century helps to democratize prosperity and not just there for a few to benefit from.
Right. I think we'll get to that. Minister, we've heard some about the potential for AI, and I wonder if you could reflect on what constraints might limit the speed of countries' adoption and their ability to harness the potential of this technology to improve living standards and productivity.
Thank you very much. And I think I will be possibly the person who's going to give you the different side instead of just celebrating AI. Few things I would note. One is it is very critical to recognize that there is actually a serious gap within the global economy between countries and then within countries itself. I mean, even though the managing director talked about the US and the benefit that they are reaping from AI, I think what we need to be careful is that gap is actually widening,
Right.
which creates significant challenges within countries. And this is why you see the serious issues in the political ecosystem, not only in the US, I'm talking about globally, where people are feeling that they are being left behind. And I think the AI may likely actually increase that gap. So one will need to be very careful. Second, I think the talent is, from a government point of view, you will need to make sure that talents are provided the opportunity to be reskilled. A lot of jobs are likely to be impacted, and you need to make sure that those impacted have an opportunity to be reskilled. Without that, we are going to widen the serious gap that a lot of countries have. Third, there are countries that have the resources, and they are likely to actually benefit from the AI generally. When I talk about AI, I talk about the wider ecosystem, but there are a lot of countries that will need support. And the international organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, and others have a serious role, to bring more awareness that if you are not careful, you are going to create serious social issues. But two, to provide support to these countries, make them more aware of what the opportunities are, what they need to do. From a government point of view, and I'll close with this, I think it is, at least for the last possibly 18 months, it has been a hype of governments going after, Ruth and her peers in the industry, saying, here is an incentive, come and set up shop in my country. And we need to be very careful with that. We need to be absolutely careful about how we are going to spend the public money, taxpayers' money, and incentivizing private enterprises to do AI just for the sake of doing AI in my country. I need to make sure that I have a clear, measurable way of holding, Google and other peers accountable to that incentive that I'm giving them from the people's money.
Yeah, Ruth, you're agreeing.
I agree. When we partner investing around the globe, I come back to many of the comments His Excellency made and think of a model, a triangle. When we go in, first and foremost, a third of the globe is not yet connected. So we will have a widening gap if we don't see that the rest of the world is connected. Some of the work Tony and I did together in Africa, Google is investing to build subsea cables that light up and link across that. We're building a terrestrial as well, but really provide the connectivity, security, and resilience in Africa. It starts with that. Training is absolutely key. Education and training so people have the skills and the fluency that is needed, and then that can unlock some of the services and solutions. What I get very excited about, and it goes very much to your comments, and we've spoken about this, is the better delivery of social services. So for example, today with healthcare supported by AI, you can, according to leading doctors here in the States, it's the only way to democratize healthcare. So for example, We're doing early detection of cancer, TB, tuberculosis, and something called diabetic retinopathy, blindness from diabetes. With early detection, which you can only do working with local organizations and the complement of AI, we can intervene and save eyesight, and are doing it. We've already done 700,000 scans. We're targeting 6 million. I'm giving you this example because it is an example that says we can't provision the support and healthcare, education, and other services that are so needed around the globe without the leverage that comes from AI. And until we see solutions like that that go right to your gut as a parent who wants to see a future for your children, people should resist AI. They should say, I see what the upside is, but why is it relevant for me? If the jobs aren't there for me, if there's the downside risk, which there clearly is, if we're not transitioning, of course there should be resistance, which is why I like being held accountable for how are we investing in education, in healthcare, and the other efforts that are needed.
Great, thank you. So, Managing Director, how big a gap is there, do you think, across the globe in countries' readiness to embrace these things? And what are the macroeconomic consequences if we end up with very uneven development?
Well, the gap, unfortunately, is very big. We looked at two things. One, how prepared are countries for AI? Staff at the fund created an AI preparedness index that ranks countries on 4 criteria. First, digital infrastructure. Do you have the physical capacity to step forward in AI? Second, skills and labor market. Are people able to benefit? 3, innovation and how it penetrates the economy. In other words, if you have innovation in a lab, can it move to transport, to healthcare, to education? And 4, and the 4th in my view is the most important, regulation and ethics. And when we ranked countries, not surprisingly, advanced economies and some especially energy-rich emerging market economies and skills-rich economies, they came up at the top. Developing countries, low-income countries, way down on this range. So we have to recognize that for developing economies, #1 issue is the foundation of infrastructure and skills. And there, take the access to electricity. Some of the last century inventions are not yet available. Half of the population in Africa has no access to electricity. This is unacceptable if we want the world to be more converging rather than diverging. And I'm particularly concerned on the issue of regulation and ethics because there, even advanced economies, many of them don't score so well. So we have a lot of work to do. And I would urge us all to look into this ranking and then see, we have members of the IMF here. Where is your country? How can we help you to move up? The second thing we look into, which is also very significant, is provided AI is already hitting the labor market, what does it mean in terms of jobs impacted? And what we came up is actually a bit scary. 60% of jobs in advanced economies over the next years will be impacted by AI. This means enhanced, becoming more productive, transformed, it was this job, now it is that job, or eliminated. In emerging markets, 40%. In low-income countries, 26%. And if you just step back and you think what it is a tsunami hitting the labor market, for which I'm not sure we are prepared. So there is that, in my hearts of heart, fear that we are more in the talk but less in recognizing that we have a big job to do. And just to tell you on my 5, I'm very optimistic that this is a transformative technology. I'm not as optimistic that it would make the world a better place. We have a lot of work to do if we want it to be the case.
Thank you. Professor Johnson, maybe you can pick up on that. I think the concern, I mean, I think I noticed this among educated workers young educated workers that I know. We went through a period of great transformation in agriculture, and there was the movement to the factory. It was disruptive to the farmers, but it took quite a while. We've now seen a lot of automation of factories, and we've seen the dislocations that trade can cause. And I think that I observe 2 things are happening. One is a whole bunch of young educated workers are feeling like, oh, AI is coming for me, that Google won't need as many entry-level coders because AI can do it. But also, it's kind of like we've gone up the tree. We're going to, technology will do all jobs. And I think the concern is that it will be a wedge that drives the winners and losers apart, both between countries, but also within countries. And so my question to you is, A, how big a concern is that of yours? And B, assuming that it's at least a concern, what are the ways that we can restrain that widening of inequality that this technology could cause?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, and Christina also articulated very, very well. And just an example, and not to pick on Ruth at all, but she mentioned 2 fascinating technologies that are coming very fast. One is Waymo, the self-driving taxis. You'll actually see them on the streets of Washington, not yet, I think, offering the service. They're mapping or getting ready. Maybe Ruth will tell us when it'll be ready or not. I don't know.
When are they going to be ready, Ruth?
It's coming.
It's coming. It's coming. So
She's here to inspect how ready they are.
This is a very impressive technology. This will change urban transportation. There are about 7 million people in the United States who work as drivers, between 3 and 4 million work as drivers in urban areas. So this is a lot of pressure. If you think about what Uber did to taxis and the provision of limousine services, it was quite transformative in American cities, but the number of rides went up, and the number of people employed in limousine services broadly defined has increased relative to the number of people before.
Right.
Waymo is an automation technology, and it will make the road safer. I'm sure Ruth is right about that. But that's a lot of jobs on the line. On the other hand, we also have AlphaFold 2, which is an amazing breakthrough technology that will change medical research, drug development, and so on. And that's fantastic opportunity for whom? Well, that's opportunity, I think, not so much for people who currently work as drivers. It's opportunity for people who have a lot of education, for example, in biology, chemistry, and other computer science-related fields. So where are the good new jobs paying high wages for people who are displaced, automated, their jobs are automated away? That's the key missing piece, I think, and that's the answer to what Christina said, both for the US and I think for all other countries, which is if we can find our ways to forms of AI that enhance the productivity, ability, capabilities of people who do not have the skills, education, expertise of the people in this room, then I think we're onto something that really can close the gaps. If it helps highly educated people become more productive, well, that's actually great for all of us, but that's going to be widening the gaps. Widening the gaps is coming for sure unless we find ways to push, not just the United States, but across all countries, and every country represented here today. Everybody has the same problem, and everybody needs to work on this together, I would propose.
So, Minister, what policies, industrial policies, education, do you think we need to be investing in to avoid the dark scenario that Simon Johnson just explained?
I think there are a few things that I just think are absolutely critical. As a government, you will need to make sure that you are, if just aside from the base, if you ask the kids today in the school, what is it that they are going to specialize on? Their worry would be, I would go and become a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, but I'm worried, what is the AI going to do on my job? And for me, I don't think it matters what actually you are going to study in school. I think what matters is that governments would need to prepare the students to actually be agile and able to learn because a lot of jobs that are going to be there in 10 years and 15 years, we don't know what they are. So you just need to make sure that you prepare the education system in a way that makes your students more adaptive and agile and able actually to learn new skills as they go. So that's one. Second, I think it is absolutely critical that we recognize small and medium enterprises are the least adapting in AI, and they are the highest employers, okay? And depending on countries, it reaches up to 90% of the employee work for SMEs. We need to make sure that also SMEs are included in this and find ways, as governments, find ways to support them to actually be able to adapt what AI can offer. The third point, and it is not just about the skills, it's not about education, unless we in the government or enterprises in the private sector accept that they need to start somewhere, make mistakes with AI, learn, and just go through the process. If you are going to wait until you are reaching the perfect case, then you will not actually start and you will be behind. So if we just make sure that governments, particularly governments I'm talking about, are able to accept that they need to adapt, they need to make sure that they minimize the mistakes and mitigate mistakes, but accept that there will be mistakes.
Right. I think that's a very good point. Trial and error is important, and there will be some failures.
Yep.
But, Minister, let's say you were speaking to a group of 18-year-old Saudi young men and women on your first point, and they expressed to you this anxiety that you well captured. What would you say to them, or what do you say to them?
I think, once again, what I would say, actually I've said this already. And
I figured, that's why I asked.
From some of the universities, I don't think you should care about what you are studying in university now, okay? Study what you actually enjoy. However, you will need to be prepared to actually learn new skills.
Yeah.
And the universities will need to enable you to do that, will need to give you that skill set that you need. Subject is not really an issue. What is really a matter of is your ability to actually learn new skills, even outside the university.
I see.
Yeah.
Mr. Alamulu, so you referred to this, but I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit. So obviously public resources in many countries are limited. And so there's a role for the private sector here, but as the managing director suggested, there's also a role for regulation and ethics. So I wonder how you think about organizing these public-private partnerships so that they have widespread social benefits and are not just a way for people who already have money to make more of it.
So a couple of points. First is to talk about the situation in Africa. Now, over 50% of the population do not have access to electricity. We have young demographic. About 60% of the population under the age of 30. And they are quite creative, energetic, and want to contribute their own part to the development of the continent. But there's significant capital constraint. There is significant infrastructure, digital infrastructure deficit. And so where do you start from? And that is where public-private partnership becomes very important. We need to attract and mobilize massive capital and investment to help address this deficit that we have on the continent. It is estimated, we're actually launching a white paper tomorrow, United Bank for Africa here. It's estimated that we have over $4 trillion in domestic capital on the continent. If we can't mobilize this, we will not put strain on the government's fiscal budget. But the challenge is in working together to mobilize this capital. And to do so, we need to establish trust We need to establish accountability. We need to make sure that the domestic savings and capital mobilization on the continent is actually working for its people and channeling that resources in the required area. If we would fix improvement in access to electricity, then we'd have, to a large extent, dealt with the issue of productivity, dealt with the issue of youth employment and engagement, and be able to support even the rest of the world. But a few more things have to happen. I've heard about governance and ethics in this space. We must know that inclusion is not automatic. Inclusion is deliberate. We need to have African voices on the table. And we must understand that digital inclusion in the 21st century is economic inclusion. If we want to deal with inequality, if we want to create and democratize prosperity across the globe, we must deal with some of these issues we're talking about here. So yes, we need smart partnerships that work. Smart partnerships that can help mobilize investment from domestic, across the continent, and from private sector across the globe without putting pressure on government. But government must provide accountability, transparency, and help to create the enabling environment that will allow the private capital mobilize to work for people so that collectively we can improve productivity, efficiency on the continent.
So, Ruth Porat, could you talk a little bit about how a company like yours views regulation and ethics that the managing director, I'm sure you're in favor of ethics, but what are the guidelines you would give to governments that are thinking about regulation? Shall we protect people from bad actors and excesses, but we don't paralyze us and prevent innovation?
So I think what's clear from the comments that we've all made is there's theoretically tremendous upside and there's downside risks, and we have to mitigate against the downside risk. And if we don't, we will continue to drive a wedge in inequality. We will continue to drive polarization in society. We will create headwinds to getting that upside. So it is absolutely imperative to have a regulatory framework that protects from the downside. I think very important comments about ensuring inclusion in this digital transformation, everything around education. And at the same time, I very much agree with the managing director that if you don't have a pro-innovation regulatory framework, you don't support entrepreneurs through R&D support and working in public-private partnerships, you impede the ability to make progress. I think Mario Draghi's report on the state of the EU and why there is a gap in GDP growth, which I think the managing director referenced, between Europe and the US, is attributable to technology and is furthermore attributable to the regulatory complexity of operating across the EU. So unequivocally, I think there's a key part that needs to protect from the downside while enabling innovation. But if I can just briefly go back to this very important point on education, you know, the reality on jobs, 60% of the jobs that exist today in the US did not exist 80 years ago. And so there's constantly been an evolution in jobs. And I think the risk that we all fear is this time, the timeline may be so compressed that labor markets don't
Instead of a generation, it's in your lifetime.
They don't have the chance. So hence the importance on job skilling and facilitating that transition. But there's another very important part of this story as well, which is job augmentation, role augmentation.
Yes.
And one of my favorite areas, going back again to healthcare, is there are not enough nurses and doctors around the globe. And what we have found is that you can free nurses, as an example, from ballpark 30% of what they do with the administrative work with AI, which gives them the opportunity to do exactly what we want and what they want, spend time with patients. And what that's facilitating, some of the work we're doing in Africa as an example, is you can, with AI, support relatively entry-level people who can provision services in a way they otherwise wouldn't, delivering at a much higher level. So it is a partner, a coach, an assist that's up-leveling and therefore enabling better delivery of critical services. One of my favorite examples is also in education. If the median age in Africa is 19, just over 19. As one digital minister said to me, we will never have enough teachers in Africa. And I grew up, my father's sentence to us was always, education is a passport to freedom. And as this digital minister said, what happens to a society when you can't educate your children? So again, it is an augmentation, it is an assist, and we should value and cherish and celebrate those elements of it, while also, I think correctly, being very focused on how do we help people transition, because there will be people, like these averages don't matter when you're the one losing your job, and how do we make that transition work?
So, I mean, you've done a lot of thinking about this. How do you respond to what Ruth says?
Well, I think one very positive way to build on all the remarks so far, David, is to say, look, this is an incredibly powerful innovation machinery led by the private sector, full speed ahead. And of course, it's always going to, any kind of private sector machine like that will always go for the markets. Where's the big market? So to the extent that we can mobilize people around the world and bring people to the table and say, in some organized way with proper governance and an IMF seal of approval, but you can have the World Bank do the work. You say, look, here's 1 billion farmers, low-income farmers, with the following issues. If you, the tech companies, can solve these problems, you're going to own these farmers, not just for this technology now, but for how they think about technology, how their children think about technology. Create the market, as we do for vaccines globally, or we used to do for vaccines. Create pre-purchase contracts and say, here's the problem, it's a well-defined problem, it has a technological angle, but there's a social angle, and the governments are on board, and we know that it works fiscally, and then bring that to the tech companies and say to them, okay, who would like to compete to offer this around the world with voices at the table? So I don't think, and I don't think Ruth was saying either, that it's a top-down, the Americans in California have the solution.
Who organizes this operation?
Well, I said the World Bank, but that was only because I was at the IMF can help too.
What is the World Bank? I don't know what that is. Minister, Simon Johnson has set up a question I want to ask you. In your role as one of the leaders of the governance of the IMF, what role do you think international institutions like this one and its cousin across the street play in helping us realize the benefits of AI and minimizing the downsides?
I think two things that these organizations would be able actually to be more impactful. One is to make sure that just the basic awareness of opportunities and risks are clear within the member countries. Doing that alone, I think they will actually be very helpful. And second, I think making sure that they support countries who are unable to actually utilize this through infrastructure. I mean, if you talk to the World Bank, they have a brilliant initiative now to connect electricity in Africa, to connect at least 300 million people to electricity network, because you cannot talk about AI if they don't have the electricity. So the basic infrastructure is absolutely critical, and making sure that people avoid, once again, people avoid the hype of just saying, I want AI for the sake of AI, and I want to be in the map. I think the organizations will be able, actually, as Kristalina said, actually possibly even create indices to nudge these countries on how to use their public resource in the most productive way to actually get more adoption of AI. But there is a lot of technical assistance parts between the World Bank and the IMF, and possibly even others, regional organizations, to help these countries.
So, as I hear you saying, I think you said there are two most important things. One is you have to have the infrastructure to take advantage of it, and the international financial institutions have both technical assistance and resources to help with that. And the second is, as I heard you right, is to help guide the countries so they don't have stupid policies that make things worse.
Absolutely.
Fair enough?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, well, we're all in favor of getting rid of stupid policies. And that's a conversation for another day in the capital of this country. Managing Director, what are the macroeconomic policies that you think are most important to make sure that we get harness AI? And how do we think about things like protectionism and the increasing fragmentation of the global financial system and trading blocks in this regard?
At the IMF, we looked into what is our role. And we came up with 3 areas where we must be very active. First, in identifying what are the opportunities and obstacles, and then help countries see where they stand vis-a-vis each other. And I talked already about the preparedness index. Second, labor markets. Look at the flexibility of labor markets, skills, where they're headed. We do this as part of our policies, and then we put it into what is our advice on fiscal policy. What should countries use their fiscal space for? And 3, and we haven't talked about it, but it is hugely important, financial stability risks related to AI. Yes, it is a tremendous opportunity, but we are now at the point when there is a huge concentration of financial assets in this country and in AI. 75% of the financial assets of this planet are in the United States. In other words, savings of Africans may be here rather than helping Africa to build infrastructure
Definitely.
for its future. Why? Because of the dynamism of the US economy, and there is huge optimism that leads to valuations being perhaps stretched. So if there was to be all of a sudden disappointment and people pull their money, that could create financial sector instability. Or if we have into AI that is actively managing financial flows and operates as a
Autonomously.
that could create very significant risk. So we want to think about these risks and do what we can to minimize them. I want to say something actually on how we should think about the future. And it is to recognize that change is unstoppable and change is accelerating. John Maynard Keynes, in 1930, wrote a fabulous essay, Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. In the midst of the recession, of the Depression, and before the war, he said, in 100 years, because of technology and human adaptability, we are going to be 8 times wealthier, we would live longer, and at that time he said, and there would be such a high productivity gain, then we would be only working 3 days a week, and the rest of the time would be writing poems. He proved to be right. We are about 8-9 times wealthier today, but what you would notice is that we are working, we are not writing poems. Well, writing poems is also work, I should be fair to the poets.
You can use AI to write your poems for you.
My point is that we this time around, it would be happening much faster, but I don't too much fear about humanity feeling useless, because we are so creative, we are so adaptable, we would figure it out, and I don't think that we would figure it out with too much redundancy. So it is a new world. I think it is a brave new world, but a world in which we have no time to waste. I want to finish with a story about my granddaughter. When she was little, I was, as a good grandmother, telling her how life was when I was her age 5. And I said, we didn't have TV, we didn't have computers. She looks up at me and says, so you only had iPads. And it made me realize how quickly change is taking place. And obviously, Ruth, we count on you to make it go even faster.
Thank you very much. I know that sounded like a closing benediction, but I have 5 minutes left, so I don't want to waste the opportunity. And Simon, what I want to ask you is, so I learned when I was a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, I used to cover Alan Greenspan's speeches. And Alan Greenspan had a habit when he didn't want to talk about monetary policy of going on these long digressions.
Like me.
No. And I remember once he taught me about Paul David, an economic historian at Stanford, who had discussed why it took so long once we had electricity for it to show up in higher productivity and living standards. And I wonder, we've talked a lot about the pros and cons and the risks and the rewards of this technology, but I wonder, what do we know about diffusion of these technologies, and what is it that helps us diffuse them better and faster and more creatively, and instead of just having 3 people who use it and the rest of us are still on our iPods?
But first, my grandmother saw the Titanic launched from Belfast.
Wow.
That's the span of 2 generations in my family. So the transformation. Look,
I hope she wasn't on it.
she was a young girl. I watched it. It was a big moment. So the thing about diffusion, David, it's a great question. So electricity, as many people will know this, really had its impact over about 30 years. Some people would say longer. And that's because you had to build a new factory in order to change the inner workings of the factory to properly use electricity. And then it was profound. Now, what we're talking about today, of course, is a technology that's distributed over existing rails. This is the point that's been made. And we know what those rails look like. They're not evenly available around the world. But everybody, the answer to Christina's initial question, everybody here was using some form of AI because we're already plugged in, this crowd is already plugged in digitally. So part of the diffusion day will be super fast to the people who are already, let's say, empowered. But then people who are not empowered, people who don't have electricity or access to any kind of compute, they're already automatically behind, right? So that's a big part of the catch-up. And the diffusion, I think, will be very fast for some and quite slow for others.
But don't we have to, to take full advantage, we have to reorganize the way we organize our work, our establishments? Yes,
so that is, it's true that both the core of it, so Henry Ford brought electricity to the moving production line in Detroit. The productivity of the assembly of cars went up massively. He needed a lot fewer people to make cars, but employment in the auto industry went up more than 20 times. And that's, so you need time to reorganize and to create those new tasks. And it's the new tasks that demand expertise that drive up wages, and that's how you share the benefits. So there's a speed differential issue here.
Okay, everybody wants to weigh in. Tony Amu, you have 60 seconds.
Okay, thanks, David. I thought this was such a great platform that I should use to say something very important, given the geography that I advocate for. One is that digital transformation must not only lead to productivity efficiency, it must also help to democratize prosperity.
Right, democratize prosperity.
A continent like Africa, you can't democratize prosperity if you don't address the demographic, the youth demographic.
Right.
And to do so, and by the way, they don't ask for sympathy. They don't ask for handout. They just want to have systems that work.
Right.
And for systems to work, we need everyone working together to achieve this.
Right, thank you.
No, one second. And finally,
I was warned about this with you.
Let me say that the model that we have practiced with Google, the 200 million Google model works, and it lends itself to people who actually want to help drive productivity that's inclusive for all.
Exactly. Ruth, a short intervention before I turn to the MD?
Even at Google, where we're an innovation machine, we do not take innovation for granted. And you had a very important part of your question. The science is here. We all need to start playing with it, applying it, but to elevate it so that you're doing something transformative really requires leadership in every organization, public and private sector. We've created something called Google Labs, which is an innovation machine, small groups of people moving at rapid pace. And at the most senior level, we look at curation to decide where is this transformative? Where can it actually drive innovation that matters. And so I would say everyone from here, if you don't know how to vibe code, figure it out, start using this material and think about the art of the possible because it's fundamentally different. And then very quickly, and this is diffusing broadly. Yesterday at the World Bank, I had the privilege of announcing with President Banga a platform that we created for farmers. It is the open network stacks. And what you can do as a farmer is you can get information that is helpful pre-harvest and post-harvest. And we're doing a pilot in India. We've already seen income levels boosted for farmers. They know more about crop infestation. They know about markets and distribution. So when you're talking about diffusion and the economic benefit, we need to all drive it across big, small organizations, the public sector, but we can also find ways where we're uplifting agricultural income and beyond.
Right. Final comment, Managing Director.
We must cooperate if we want to reduce the risk of people and countries falling behind. We must cooperate. And I think of my institution main mandate, bring all our members together, work together for the benefit of all.
Well, from your lips to God's ears. Please join me in thanking an excellent panel.
Thank you, David.